Anton, welcome to Aviation Talk by Skywing World.
Thank you, Gabe. It's
uh,
good to be
how
here.
are you? Yeah, how's it been? Long time.
Yeah, it's been a while. Winter hasn't been really good to us with all the non-flying weather. But look,
Yeah,
hopefully it's all getting better now, and we're going into spring. We'll get a lot of flying done.
definitely. Yeah, I still got to book a few flights. But just for everybody, Anton is actually my flight instructor. I'm currently getting my PPL. I actually just got my medical back, so
Oh,
I've been approved on that, which is great.
that's great news.
Um,
Yeah,
and I still got to do my radio license. So
come on, get
bear
on
with
it.
me on that one. We could actually talk about the radio license as well, and like how to find different things on what to, like where to find information to study to
Mhm.
prepare yourselves for these exams, like the P Star, for instance, as well. So the first question I wanted to ask, just give us a brief history about yourself, what you did in the past before becoming an instructor, or on the process of becoming an instructor.
Okay. Yeah, so like you said, I'm an instructor in the Brand Flight Center at the moment, and I've been one since September 2019. So it's been a while now, I guess. But how did I want? Why did I become an instructor? I guess it's all about the piloting career. So I always wanted to be a pilot, and that's a very kind of a standard reply from anybody who's flying. Always wanted to be a pilot since I was a kid, and that's it couldn't be further from the truth. So we're all looking up in the sky, watching all those planes. But I was I grew up in Ireland, and it was quite expensive to become a pilot there. So the closest I can do was study aerospace engineering, and that's what I ended up doing. Did a bachelor's, a master's in aerodynamics, and then moved to Canada. And then as I was working full time as an engineer, 2 years into it, I kind of that flashback came in, and I asked myself, well, I wanted to be a pilot all the time, a long time ago. Why didn't I go through with it? Half along the way, I kind of settled to be an engineer. So yeah, I researched around the flight schools we had around Toronto, and just came across Brampton, and they seemed to be the best reputation, the friendliest place. I went to a couple of flight schools just to talk to the people there, and Brampton was my choice. So what I ended up doing was getting all my private pilot's license, commercial pilot's license as a part-time while I was working. And then once I got my commercial pilot license, I said, that's it. I love flying. The thrill you get on every takeoff and landing, as you know yourself, is
Oh yeah.
something something special. So I said, look, I'm going to dedicate full time now. I quit my job, got my instructor rating, and got hired by Brampton. So that's basically my career so far.
So, becoming an instructor, when you say like the instructor rating, you assuming you would need your CPL. Like, what's the process behind that
Yeah,
specifically?
yeah. So the instructor rating essentially allows you to teach people licenses and ratings that you also have, and obviously you're going to do that as a reward for money. So one of the criteria is if in order to earn money as a pilot, you need to have a commercial license. That's why you can't really have a instructor rating without a commercial license. So the minimum requirements for instructor rating are a commercial license essentially, and at that point you can teach anything: private pilot's license, commercial pilot's license students, any kind of recreational permit. But in order to teach instrument rating, for instance, you have to have an instrument rating yourself, obviously.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, as an instructor, what would you say would be the easiest way to go about getting your licenses, like your PPL, CPL, your instructor rating, sorry, your ratings, like the instrument ratings, the night ratings,
Okay.
that kind of.
Yeah, so first of all, you'd have to get your licenses, right? And then you add the ratings onto them. So I'd say the best way would be is to research the flight schools around your area, which are within driving distance. The closer they are, the better, really, because as I found myself, life does get in the way, especially if you're doing it part-time, and having a school close by is definitely making it a lot easier. Um, so once you found your school, there's you enroll in ground school, okay? And most of the schools offer ground school. There's some schools that offer them online, even for those of you who don't want to say drive into the school every time, so you can do everything online. And once you start your ground school, I typically recommend kind of getting into the first couple of lessons where they talk about the theory of flight, the aerodynamics, the flight instruments in the aircraft. Get that out of the way before actually starting flight training, because that really helps in your first training, first lesson, where the instructor will be talking to you about the attitudes and movements and the instruments in your cockpit. You'll already have some kind of background knowledge from your ground school, and not everything will be new to you in that environment then. And then once you start your flight training, your next milestone is essentially to get your um, first solo done. A solo is where, for the first time, you're fully in command of the plane, you're on your own, and you take off, you do a circuit around the airdrome, and do a landing all by yourself without your instructor sitting beside you. So, in order to do that, you need to get a student pilot permit, and this is specifically in Canada. Okay, and a student pilot permit will be issued to you once you have your medical done, your class 1, or class 3 medical. Then you have your your radio license, and you've passed a written exam called the P-STAR in Canada. And that's essentially kind of the regulations, rules of the air, specifically required to go flying solo and for the purposes of flight training. So once those three are out of the way, you have your student pilot permit, and once your flight instructor is feeling comfortable to let you go solo, then that's when you take your first step, and you complete your first solo. After that, your flight training continues. You complete all of your exercises in the practice area. You prepare for your flight test. You do your flight test as well. And at that point, once you've completed it, you got your private pilot's license, and you're officially a pilot at that point. Okay.
Okay.
So
And go on. Sorry.
yeah, so that's essentially the first license you're getting, a private pilot's license. From that point onwards, you can fly any blanketed type aircraft, blanket ratings, single engine land aircraft that don't require any special training or type certificates, and carry passengers. So you are limited to daytime flying only, which is very restrictive in some times of year, especially in the winters where it gets dark quite early. So it's in your interest. What you could get then is night rating, which allows you to fly at night. That's a very quick rating, and gets you a bit more proficient on instrument flying and flying at night. And the next step essentially is your commercial pilot's license, where you get a lot more proficient at doing the exercises, feeling the aircraft, and once you get your commercial pilot's license, then you can officially earn money flying as a pilot.
Hmm. And now, as far as the ATPL goes, ATP, ATL, ATP, ATPL, yeah.
Yeah,
As far
airline
as
transport
ATPL, yeah.
pilot's license. Yeah.
Um, how do you get that? Like,
Okay.
is that kind of given to you after, or how does that work?
So if you look at the hierarchy of the licenses, the kind of the lowest level, not the lowest level, but the initial, the first level is the private pilot license. You're flying by yourself for recreational purposes. You can't earn money as that. Then you have the commercial pilot's license, which allows you first to start earning money. But with the commercial license, you're not allowed to fly in, as a as a captain in an airline, we'll say, for which you have an airline transport pilot's license, ATPL. And that's kind of the top tier license, at least in Canada, where you're allowed to be as flying, an airline captain, essentially. And I mean, you don't need an ATPL to fly as a first officer. All you need is a commercial license with what's called an IATRA, which is a multi-crew environment, and a rating on top of it. But if you do want to progress to be a captain, then you need to do the ATPL license. And what that involves is you can think of it as a checklist of requirements. There's the written and the experience ones. So the written is there's two extra Transfer Canada written exams you have to write, and then the experience you start accumulating, say, as you're building up the hours. So like the first kind of major requirement is you need at least 1,500 hours of total time in an aircraft. Whereas a commercial pilot's license, you need 200 hours. So there's a big kind of jump in total hours, as well as night cross-country hours, instrument hours, etc. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. And for PPL, how much is it? How many hours do you need for PPL?
So PPL, you need a minimum of 45 hours.
Okay, so 45 hours. And I'm assuming not many people just stop at the 45 hours. They kind of
Yeah,
fly.
exactly. So if you think about it, the 45 hours, that's the Transfer Canada minimum amount. They had to put a number there, right? So it's very few kind of people that are ready to do the flight test at 45 hours. I believe I read somewhere that across Canada, the average for PPL hours when the people are ready to do their flight test is about 70.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so enough about the educational side of things. As I was telling you before, that this podcast, video, interview, whatever you want to call it, we also want to talk about like different experiences you had in your career as an instructor, as well as in the past before you became an instructor, right? So
Mhm.
working as an engineer, we've heard many different stories from who I've already interviewed. But can you tell me a time where you've experienced like some crazy things? I know we had one with the flap failure on my second flight, I believe. You know.
Yeah, that was an interesting case we had actually. Yeah, we went out, if you remember, we were practicing some climbs in descents, and during after one of the power off descents, when we did an overshoot and cleaned up the aircraft from full flaps to a clean configuration, the flaps got stuck at 10 degrees.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
At 10 degrees. Yeah.
So, I mean, it does happen sometimes when when we came back and I checked with the maintenance personnel, they said there was a wire which was brought loose with vibrations. So it just took it was a pretty quick, easy fix. But yeah, those are the kind of cases you might come across. So for, what all the flight training does to you is essentially prepares you for any of these kind of scenarios where you have flap failures, whether they don't retract or extend or don't retract. There's main thing is as a pilot, we'll say you're not allowed to panic. You're allowed to be scared, but you're not allowed to panic. So you always revert back to your flight training. You stay calm and you react as you were trained logically. A lot of times you have a lot of time in the aircraft to think about it, diagnose, and think of um, what is the best plan to follow. And if you remember, we just did a slow cruise back to the airport and landed safely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was actually one of the experiences I remember clearly. Like we were doing that was the first time we actually did a forward slip, I believe,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Getting into the runway. So seeing that happen or feeling that happen for the very first time, it was a little put me on edge a bit, but definitely it was an experience, and I think that'll just make me better as a pilot eventually, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of things like that that I say you'd be lucky to experience because if it happens to you when you're alone, then you can always go back and say, hey, you know what, I've seen this before and I can deal with it appropriately. There have been some cases where, um, based on weather forecasts, we would say, okay, we can go up flying, but then the weather forecasts, as you know, are not always correct. So, I remember with another student, we were flying back and the weather deteriorated pretty quickly, and that wasn't in the weather forecast. And we found ourselves in 5 statute miles visibility. So we're still legal, but the student got an experience of what 5 statute miles vis looks like. and the next time they looked at the weather forecast and the forecast said it's 5 or 6 miles, they'd say, okay, well, I know what that looks like. I don't think I want to fly in that. So it would be, it's kind of a lessons learned in that case.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I get it. So, um, where do you see yourself as a pilot in the future? Like, are
Okay.
you thinking of becoming a pilot for an airline, or trying to do something like a charter, like private?
Yeah, so I mean, at the moment, I'm an instructor. I'm class three. At the moment, they do progress through class four as the kind of the beginner instructor. Class three, getting better. Class two is kind of I would say even a senior instructor at that point, and then class one are the top instructors that every flight school has that are actually able to teach other instructors to become instructors. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So at the moment, I'm class three. So I'm definitely sticking around until I get to class two, get all the experience I can. And going forward, a lot of kind of pilots want to see themselves in an airline position, going, kind of towards the end of their career. But I think it's important to kind of get the experience of not just airline flying, and I think it'll be interesting to work in an area like medevac, medical evacuation,
Mm-hmm.
or even kind of transport role. So maybe that could be a progression of a career: instructor, medevac, and then maybe get into the airlines and see how that works out.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Very nice. Yeah, and actually, the last interview we did with Lost Aviator Coffee, one of the pilots who
Hmm.
owns it, he used to be a medevac captain.
Okay.
So yeah, he has some cool stories you'll probably find on our YouTube channel in the next few days. But
Yeah, looking forward to it.
yeah, do you have any last minute remarks to tell our reviewers? Students, like people who want to become pilots. You know, anything that you might want to tell somebody before becoming a pilot, or
Well,
before starting the training and stuff.
Well, I mean, first of all is, question, should I become a pilot or not? And, there's a lot of talk going around that, particularly with COVID and these times, there's not a lot of jobs and pilots are losing jobs. But if you look at any kind of, disruption in the airline business previously, recessions, yeah, there's been some dark times, but it always bounced back up higher than it was before in terms of the amount of, pilots required. Um, and the pilot shortage is a real thing. So if you're thinking, should I try to get the flight training done, or is it a waste of time? I definitely think it's not. There'll definitely be room for pilots in the future, and so if you're kind of looking for that push, should I suggest head out to a nearest flight school and try what's called an introductory flight. And I believe, you did your introductory flight yourself with
Yeah.
me, and that's when you really realized, hey, this is amazing. I like it,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
So that could be kind of a little push in the we'll say the right direction to try it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in terms of flight training itself, I would say the first private pilot's license stage of that is the most difficult one, because you're simply going from zero to hero, right? So you're coming from an environment where you don't know how to fly a plane to the point when you get your pilot's license, that you can do a safe, walk around with the aircraft, all your flight planning safely, take off, fly somewhere and land without any help from an instructor or otherwise. That really takes you from zero to hero. Certainly, commercial license pilots is little kind of upgrade. You already know how to fly. You're just perfecting that skill, right? So it does take some time. Definitely, kind of stick to it. Sometimes life gets in the way, and I see myself. But it's important to kind of set goals in your career or in your flight training, and say, okay, by this time, I want to get this goal done, and just stick to it, and kind of hold yourself accountable.
For
Yeah.
sure. Awesome. Well, thank you, Anton. I appreciate it, and definitely, I really hope that after all this COVID stuff is over, and when things open up again, we'll definitely fly, because I still need to finish my training as
Yeah.
well
Oh,
behind
absolutely.
it.
We'll get you licensed by the end of the summer.
I really hope so. I really hope so. Well, thank you, Anton. I appreciate it.